He may be even more famous than his friend Sean Diddy Combs, and now he's facing similar accusations of sexual assault in civil court. But Jay-Z isn't backing down without a fight. We're going to be taking a closer look at the longtime friendship relation that Combs' celebrity friends, his associates, that they could all be pulled into this legal nightmare. And one of the people at risk, often mentioned online, was Jay-Z, real name Sean Carter, who came up in the New York rap scene alongside Sean Combs. And just a few days ago, Texas attorney Tony Buzbee made it official. He filed an amended complaint on behalf of a Jane Doe who says that she was raped by Combs and Carter when she was just 13 years old, that this happened at a VMA's after party back in 2000. Now, the original complaint mentioned Celebrity A and Celebrity B, a man and woman, as being present for and even Celebrity A participating in the alleged assault. Well, now Celebrity A has been identified as Jay-Z, who has adamantly denied anything like that ever happening. He is very, very clear on that. In fact, he has accused Tony Buzbee of extortion, saying that Buzbee's attempts to get celebrities to pay out huge sums of money in exchange for not being named in civil lawsuits with what he claims are false allegations amounts to blackmail. In fact, Jay-Z is believed to be the John Doe who just recently filed a lawsuit against Tony Buzbee anonymously, claiming extortion and intentional infliction of emotional distress. And we'll get to more of that in just a moment. But first, I want to focus on these connections between Jay-Z and Sean Combs. I mean, after all, why were people making these associations between the two even before there was a lawsuit? Well, let's go back in time. 1997, after their mutual friend Biggie Smalls was killed, Jay-Z and Combs collaborated, and they collaborated on Combs' second album, for example, In My Lifetime, Volume 1. They both faced criminal charges in the late 90s, Jay-Z for allegedly stabbing a man at a club in New York, Combs for fleeing the scene of a nightclub shooting also in New York. Both avoided jail time, got probation instead. The two reportedly bonded over their experiences. Both men were wildly successful in their careers as music producers and rappers. Forbes announced in 2019 that Jay-Z became hip-hop's first billionaire, reportedly now has an estimated net worth of around $2.5 billion, again, according to Forbes. 2021, Forbes reported Combs was worth around $900 million. Became a billionaire in 2022, reportedly. Now, to be clear, since then, with everything going on, he's lost brand deals, other investments, so now he's estimated to have a net worth at around $400 million. But going back to Jay-Z, he is, of course, married to Beyonce, right? The two started dating in the early 2000s when Beyonce was reportedly 19, Jay-Z 33. Beyonce collaborated with Sean Combs, though, on a song in 2003 called Summertime. And the three music titans, they were often seen at parties and public events over the last few decades together, photos, videos of them together. Now, Jay-Z's family is standing behind him during this recent development, this lawsuit. In fact, the family appeared together at the Los Angeles premiere of Disney's Mufasa: The Lion King on Monday. That's, by the way, the same day that it was announced this rape lawsuit came to be. And by the way, 12-year-old Blue Ivy, Beyonce and Jay-Z's oldest daughter, she co-stars with her mom in the new film. Now, Jay-Z and Diddy, they have had similar paths in the music industry and entertainment world when you think about it. For instance, both have their own entertainment companies, Roc Nation for Jay-Z, Bad Boy Entertainment for Combs. Roc Nation represents artists like Rihanna and J. Cole. Bad Boy has signed Machine Gun Kelly, Janelle Monáe. Both men dip their toes into the fashion world. Jay-Z and Damon Dash are the founders of Rocawear. Combs launched Sean John. The duo have also used their fame to leverage major deals with liquor brands. Combs is famous for his partnership with Ciroc Vodka, often featuring it in his music videos, at his infamous parties. Jay-Z invested millions of dollars in Armand de Bernac champagne before he eventually sold his stake in the company for more than $300 million. 2015, Jay-Z launched Tidal, this music streaming service. Combs started the television network Revolt TV in 2013. And both Combs and Jay-Z, they have been very instrumental in the music industry and have launched the careers of other artists. They both famously mentored Usher, who has said that he went to New York to learn about the business when he was still a teen, got a crash course in what the scene was like in the early 2000s. And years later, by the way, Combs would offer the same type of mentorship to a young Justin Bieber. Both Jay-Z and Combs, they appeared alongside DJ Khaled as he was awarded a star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame in 2022. So you have two titans in the music industry who appeared to be quite close. And all of this just goes to show how much time Jay-Z and Combs have spent together over the past few decades. Is it possible that Jay-Z had no idea of the accusations against Sean Combs? I mean, assuming that these allegations are true, allegations that he raped and sexually assaulted both men and women, even children, and that he held these freak-offs, basically these orgies that involved commercial sex workers and drugs and camera equipment. Is it possible Jay-Z didn't know anything about this, assuming these allegations are true? And now Jay-Z finds himself caught up in this scandal because Tony Busby has named him in this lawsuit. And before I even go into the lawsuit for a second, the fact that he has just been sued and the fact that he is fighting this, you do have to wonder, will other people come forward with other lawsuits against Jay-Z? These are just allegations. We don't know if they're true or not. But what happened with Sean Combs? Once Cassandra Ventura filed a lawsuit against him, every lawsuit came out. So it'll be very curious to see what happens next. But to be clear, what does Tony Busby say about Jay-Z, the artist, the businessman? Well, the complaint begins, defendant Sean Combs, along with his longtime friend and collaborator, Sean Carter, drugged and raped a 13-year-old girl at an after-party following the 2000 Video Music Awards. Another celebrity stood by and watched as Combs and Carter took turns assaulting the minor. Many others were present at the after-party but did nothing to stop the assault. Combs had been allowed for years to conduct himself in this manner without any consequences. He believes he is above the law. He is not. His close friend Sean Carter has been with Combs during many such instances described herein. Both perpetrators must face justice. So that seems to suggest that Sean Carter, Jay-Z, was not only present or participated in this alleged, what is essentially a crime, but for other instances. And that's really interesting. That's why I bring up this idea of, could he be hit with more lawsuits if you take these allegations as true? Now, the complaint goes on to say, Combs and Carter were not simply occasional collaborators in the music industry. The two men developed a close friendship that has been well documented from the late 1990s to the present. Together, they attended countless music industry events, events for each other's business ventures, parties, and after-parties. Indeed, the two are apparently so close that Combs stated in 2023 that Carter is the only person, other than Combs' mother, who is allowed to call him by his legal first name of Sean. In 2000, near the height of their fame, power, and influence, Combs and Carter attended the 2000 Video Music Awards in New York City. Afterwards, Combs hosted an after-party for many of the most famous celebrities in the music and entertainment industries, including Carter, which is where the events alleged in this complaint occurred. And by the way, as an aside, let me also say real quick, it's not just us here at Long Crime that have been covering these Diddy stories and updates for you. Websites all over the internet are grabbing readers with headlines like, Puff Daddy stays in jail for trying to influence witnesses. Woman sues Sean Combs for raping her. And that is exactly where a platform like Ground News comes in. So what they are is a small independent team that we actually partner with because they can help us deliver just the facts when we report on stories like this. You can go to ground.news/sidebar to follow along while I show you how it works with this Diddy story. So we get a quick summary of how Diddy's lawyers claim prosecutors allegedly unlawfully obtained his jail cell notes, including attorney-client privileged information. Remember that? Well, based on every source that Ground News found on reporting on this, the left are clearly dominating coverage, making this a potential blind spot for more conservative news consumers. But it's not just about who's covering the story, it's also about how they're covering it. Well, Ground News calculated the majority of these articles come from highly credible sources, so you can instantly see which headlines are more objective and which might be skewing the facts. The bottom line here, don't let someone else's spin shape your understanding of the truth. Just head to ground.news/sidebar or scan the QR code right there and use our link to save 50% off of the top tier Vantage plan, which offers unlimited access. It's the same plan that we've been using. So thank you to Ground News for sponsoring this episode of Sidebar. And I should also say that Busby also used this complaint to address an alleged harassment campaign that he claims Jay-Z started after Busby reached out about his involvement in the suit. The complaint reads, Carter was identified in plaintiff's original complaint as Celebrity A. Prior to the filing of this amended complaint, Carter received a letter from plaintiff's counsel requesting a mediation to resolve this matter. Upon present information and belief, Jay-Z responded to said letter by not only filing an utterly frivolous lawsuit, the one that I mentioned before, but by also orchestrating a conspiracy of harassment, bullying, and intimidation against plaintiffs' lawyers, their families, employees, and former associates in an attempt to silence plaintiff from naming Jay-Z herein. This effort was meant to scare plaintiff and to discredit her counsel. That effort failed. Indeed, plaintiff chose to file this amendment as a result of the egregious conduct perpetuated by Carter. So for now, the plaintiff has filed as a Jane Doe, keeping her identity as a secret. Jay-Z's legal team has filed a flurry of legal paperwork calling for her to be unmasked so that Jay-Z can face his accuser on an even playing field. We'll see how that shakes out. I actually dedicated a whole other sidebar to that. But for now, we don't know her name. Now, I will say, it is interesting, as we're talking about how close Jay-Z and Sean Combs are, or were, because based on the recent filings from Jay-Z's legal team in response to this lawsuit, there seems to be, arguably, a distancing of Jay-Z from Sean Combs. Why do I say that? Because, for instance, in Jay-Z's effort to say that Jane Doe should not remain anonymous, they address the argument from Jane Doe where she says, look, I can't reveal my name for security reasons, that Combs has engaged in threats of violence in the past, that if I reveal who I am, I could be in danger. Okay, Jay-Z responds to that by saying, or his counsel responds to that by saying the following. Plaintiff's counsel stresses that other alleged victims he represents have stated that Mr. Combs made threats of violence against them or against the client's family members if the client disclosed to anyone the facts of the sexual assaults. But there is certainly no allegation that Carter ever threatened to harm plaintiff, nor could he, as he has no idea who she is. Or how about this? Those cases concerned Combs, who is under indictment and detained following a raft of criminal and civil allegations against him. But plaintiff has now sought to sully the reputation of Mr. Carter, who has never been accused of misconduct in his 37 adult years. So you're seeing that distancing in a way. At least that's what I saw. Now, going back to the actual complaint here, let's talk about it. So Jane Doe claims that when she was 13 years old, she went to the VMAs, the Video Music Awards in New York City. Now, she says she didn't have a ticket, so she couldn't get into the event, but she walked around outside Radio City Music Hall, where one of the limo drivers for Sean Combs reportedly told her to come back later and that he would take her to a party that Combs was throwing. So Jane Doe claims that when she got there, she had to sign paperwork that she didn't really understand, reportedly some sort of non-disclosure agreement. And she was also allegedly handed a drink at this party, which she believes was drugged. She says she started feeling woozy, she didn't feel right, so she went to find somewhere to lay down. The complaint says Combs entered the room along with defendant Carter and a female celebrity, Celebrity B. Plaintiff immediately recognized all three celebrities. Combs aggressively approached plaintiff with a crazed look in his eyes, grabbed her and said, "You are ready to party." Combs then threw plaintiff toward a wall, causing plaintiff to fall. Plaintiff got up and stumbled, at which point Combs grabbed her again and threw her on the bed. At that point, Carter began removing plaintiff's clothes as she grew more and more disoriented. Jane Doe claims that both Jay-Z and Sean Combs raped her that night before she was finally able to get away. The lawsuit says Combs then knocked plaintiff down and attempted to force plaintiff to perform oral sex on him. She fought back, standing up quickly and punching out at the same time, hitting Combs in the neck. Taken aback, Combs stopped his attempt. When Combs backed away in surprise, plaintiff grabbed her clothes and shoes and ran out of the bedroom, holding her dress in front of her like a towel. She ran around the residence until she found the front door and was able to leave the party. Although there were other guests still at the party, no one appeared to take notice of plaintiff's distress or attempted to help her. Once outside, plaintiff put her clothes back on and left the scene in the dark. And she says she was able to make it to a gas station and call for her dad to come pick her up. So this allegedly happened in 2000, by the way. It's now 2024. Hasn't there been a statute of limitations issue? Hasn't the time run out even on a serious claim like this? Well, this is a civil case, not a criminal case. But also Jane Doe is filing under New York City's Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Act. And that provides a look-back window for victims to file these kinds of claims against their alleged abusers. It doesn't even have to be sexual abuse. It just has to be violence that is motivated by gender. So the complaint explains a little bit more how this fits in. It says the requirement that the crime of violence be committed because of gender or on the basis of gender and due at least in part to an animus based on the victim's gender is satisfied because defendants Combs and Carter forced minor plaintiff to engage in a sexual interaction without consent. Jane Doe could not effectively consent because of her age. The non-consensual sexual touching of a minor herein presented a serious risk of physical injury and in fact caused such injury. And by the way, Combs and Jay-Z, they aren't the only people named as defendants in this case. The complaint also names several of Combs' businesses, like Bad Boy Entertainment LLC and Combs Enterprises LLC. The complaint alleges the Combs businesses enabled and conspired with Combs and Carter to commit the crime of violence motivated by gender because Combs and Carter sexually assaulted plaintiff at a party related to or referencing Combs' business. So for now, the focus of the legal fight for Jay-Z is getting the judge to rule that Jane Doe must reveal her identity or throw out the lawsuit. And by the way, if she has to reveal her identity, there's a chance she might not proceed with this case. Does she want to be public going after both Sean Combs and Jay-Z? It's something you have to think about. Now, Jay-Z's version of what happened here is that he refused to be what he and his lawyers call extorted or blackmailed by Tony Busby. In fact, in a statement in response to the lawsuit, Jay-Z said in part, quote, "My lawyer received a blackmail attempt called a demand letter from a lawyer named Tony Busby. What he had calculated was the nature of these allegations and the public scrutiny would make me want to settle. No, sir. It had the opposite effect. It made me want to expose you for the fraud you are in a very public fashion. So no, I will not give you one red penny." And also said in his statement, "You have made a terrible error in judgment, thinking that all celebrities are the same." And then later he said, "I look forward to showing you just how different I am." Now, Busby also responded on X denying that this was the case, writing in part, quote, "No one has made any threats. Jay-Z's assertions are bogus and laughable. Instead, our firm sent a standard demand letter seeking a mediation on behalf of a woman who alleges Jay-Z sexually assaulted her as a minor. The letter was vetted and approved by our client, whose preference was to attempt resolution short of filing a lawsuit. This approach is common in these types of cases. What you are seeing played out now is a coordinated and desperate effort to focus the public's attention on me personally to avoid attention on the allegations being made by my clients." And we learned that Jay-Z is also believed to be the John Doe who recently filed a lawsuit anonymously against Tony Busby, claiming extortion and intentional infliction of emotional distress. We didn't know who it was, but it seems to be that it was Jay-Z. And now there is also this heated back and forth about whether Jane Doe in this lawsuit should be able to proceed anonymously in her lawsuit. Jay-Z and his legal team are pushing for her to have her reveal herself, partly because they say Jay-Z has a right to know his accuser, to investigate her claims, to challenge her. It's only fair. Busby counters by saying this is highly sensitive material and revealing her identity could cause her further trauma. Also, there is a safety concern about her identifying herself. And now, in an interesting side tidbit, which we'll get into, a woman allegedly reached out to Jay-Z's legal team explaining her experiences with Tony Busby's law firm, where she is essentially claiming that she was dropped as a client when she refused to adopt a sexual assault narrative that the firm wanted her to proceed with. It's shocking. I'm going to get into that. But for that and so much more, I have to bring on one of our favorites, renowned litigator, trial attorney Ben Chu, who famously represented Johnny Depp in his very high-profile civil trial against Amber Heard. My goodness. I mean, what do you want to talk about first? You want to first talk about the allegations in the Jay-Z lawsuit before we talk about the legal war that's going on? What do you make of the fact that he has been identified in this case and the allegations against him?
Good morning, Jesse. It's great to see you again. Yeah, these are shocking allegations, and I think he's put out a very forceful statement against them, which I think is a good move, both legally and in terms of PR. You know, assuming, of course, that he is innocent of that. I think these are the kinds of allegations that one would expect someone falsely accused to push back on extremely strongly, which he has now done.
For people who haven't read the complaint, let me just give them a sample. It reads, Combs then threw plaintiff toward a wall. Again, allegedly 13 years old when this happened. Combs then threw plaintiff toward a wall, causing plaintiff to fall. Plaintiff got up and stumbled, at which point Combs grabbed her again and threw her on the bed. At that point, Carter began removing plaintiff's clothes as she grew more and more disoriented. And then the complaint says that Jay-Z raped this 13-year-old, and then Diddy allegedly raped her too. And she claims she actually fought back, hit Combs in the neck, was able to grab her clothes, run out of the room. Ben, could she win a case like this based purely on her testimony? If this is so old, maybe there's no surveillance, maybe there's no text messages, maybe there's no forensics. Could she win based purely on her account of what happened?
She could theoretically win if her testimony were especially compelling, but I think you put your finger on one of the real weaknesses is that these allegations are ancient. One thing that leapt out to me is the allegations also include that there was a witness,
Yes.
other than Diddy, who a female, another woman. Her testimony, and obviously she will be subpoenaed, could be crucial. I mean, if that testimony corroborated the plaintiff's claims, then that would be something that would really be a game changer. But the plaintiff alone, I think, is going to face some credibility issues, especially when you have Jay-Z. I mean, Diddy, the allegations are pretty widespread, but there haven't been similar allegations about Jay-Z, and that
What
really sets his case apart.
I believe you're referring to Celebrity B, this female celebrity who was in that room. Do you think this person has settled maybe her claims with Tony Busby? What do I mean by that? If she was present, I imagine that Tony Busby might have reached out to her and said, listen, I can file a lawsuit against you too because of you being there. You were present. You were a witness. Maybe. Do you think that this is a person who maybe already settled her claim so that she would be a cooperating witness for Tony Busby's case? I mean, tell me how you think that might work.
That would be a brilliant move if that's what Busby did, because otherwise he is making really, the worst, the harshest kinds of allegations, and he's signing his name to it. I mean, he referred to his client vetting a demand letter. Well, sure, the client is supposed to vet the demand letter for in terms of the factual allegations, but the legal allegations, the legal import of that is in the province of the attorney. So you can't necessarily just hide behind your client. But were he to have made a deal with Celebrity B, that would really backstop both his client and himself in terms of his potential exposure for being involved in frivolous litigation.
But you think Celebrity B would take any kind of deal where they have to testify and say, yeah, I was in a room while a 13-year-old was being sexually assaulted, and yeah, I'm not being sued now because I settled my claims. I mean, either way, if this is true and this person knows who Celebrity B was, I can't even imagine, even if they were a cooperating witness of some kind, that they don't look really, really bad from this.
I totally agree. I think that premise is dubious for the reasons you mentioned. I mean, Celebrity B, while it would be a terrible thing not to have reported these crimes, and they're very serious crimes if in fact they were committed, but it's unclear what, if any, civil liability Celebrity B would not have or would have for not being a good Samaritan. I mean, I think the statute on that, to the extent that there's any liability for not reporting, had long since been passed. So I don't think she would have any legal or factual incentive to make such a deal. I think her incentive would be not to cooperate at all and to deny that she witnessed any such thing.
Right. Let's get into a little bit of this legal warfare that's going on. What do you make of the fact that Busby revealed Jay-Z as Celebrity A based on what he says was a failure to meet on mediation, that this was a standard demand letter? What do you make of his version of events?
Well, I have one problem. I mean, he's right in the sense, as you know, Jesse, that it's standard and it's smart to give a potential defendant an opportunity to settle prior to prior to filing a lawsuit, because at that point the plaintiff would have kind of detonated the grenade and forced the defendant in a position where he almost has to fight. Whereas when you send a demand letter and say that you're interested to talk and settle the matter on a confidential basis. That is an appropriate standard thing to do, assuming that you have a legitimate claim. Where I think he's on weaker ground is where he is litigating this in the media and making statements defending himself. One of my mentors always told me, never defend yourself, defend your client, and always
Mm.
remember that you're representing yourself. And the only time you answer any allegations against yourself is when a judge is specifically asking you to. And I think that Busby crossed that line in the sense that he's now giving press conferences talking about himself and his own actions when he should be representing his client. That's just my opinion, but I think it's unwise for him to get into a PR war.
Do you think that rises to the level of extortion, as Jay-Z's claims? Because let me read you a portion from one of their filings. To coerce Mr. Carter into compliance, plaintiff and attorney Busby imposed an arbitrary deadline in their extortionate demand letter, warning Mr. Carter that they would take a different course if he did not agree to a confidential mediation to resolve this delicate, important matter. Without even waiting for the deadline provided by the extortionate demand letter to pass, attorney Busby posted on social media that he intended to file a lawsuit naming Mr. Carter and attaching the extortionate demand letter to punish Mr. Carter for seeking redress from a court. All along, Mr. Carter refused to bow to attorney Busby's scheme. Faced with the choice to either pay an exorbitant sum to silence plaintiff's wild, false allegations of sexual assault, risking irreparable harm to his reputation, family, career, and livelihood, or face a barrage of baseless lawsuits and financial ruin, Mr. Carter stood his ground. On November 18, 2024, Mr. Carter filed a complaint against attorney Busby and his law firm for his extortionate conduct. So a little bit what you said about the media, but what do you take about that version of events?
Yeah, I don't have any problem with Busby giving a deadline. You really have to give a deadline. Otherwise, there's no incentive for the potential defendant to ever respond. But what the problem in this scenario is that he didn't give the defendant the full benefit of the deadline. In other words, if you give somebody a deadline, respond by December 27th, you shouldn't say anything until December 27th, unless the defendant has already said, no, we're not going to pay, go ahead and file your lawsuit. So I think if you give somebody a deadline, I think you should honor it. You shouldn't act prematurely. If you go public prematurely, it's a badge of bad faith. Whether it is bad faith or not is open to question, but I think if you've got to be true to your word. If you want to give them a deadline, let them have until the deadline.
Also, I want your thoughts real quick on something else, Ben. The idea that Jane Doe should have to reveal her identity, and whether or not the court will say she has to reveal her identity, and B, is that the proper move from Jay-Z's camp to do? So there's two sides to this. Busby says in part, sensitive, details of sexual assault, her having to reveal that is incredibly traumatic. The media attention on this case would create a chilling effect from other people coming forward. Combs has made threats of violence in the past, so her, revealing herself could be problematic. Jay-Z argues, look, I have a right to know who my accuser is, to research that person. People won't come over with helpful evidence that could help my case, my defense, if they don't know who this person is. The public has a right to know who she is. She is the one who filed the lawsuit, put her credibility into issue by voluntarily filing a lawsuit. Who's right?
I have fairly strong opinions on this since I've had several clients who've been in that position, and I think that Jay-Z's counsel is absolutely right on this. If you make serious allegations of this nature, you shouldn't be able to hide behind the shield of anonymity. These are incredibly serious. I mean, to me, I would rather be accused of murder than rape of a child. If you were going to make these kinds of allegations, I think you have to be revealed. Now, exceptions for that are the ones you mentioned. If this victim or alleged victim were still underage, I think there'd be a strong argument for protecting what would be a child. But this is an adult woman at this point. Second exception is the one you also referenced, the possibility of violence. Now that's quite real, and I think that's something the judge would have to weigh. Although I don't think there's any indication that any threats have emanated from Jay-Z's camp.
Right.
But absent something like that, a real showing of potential danger should the plaintiff's name be revealed, I think it's absolutely fair for the accuser's name to be mentioned. And the reason why I think also in terms of the fairness is that if that person's name is out there, then people may come forward. If there have been I had a case where we did a similar thing, that our client was accused of civilly of sexual battery, and we moved the court to have that adult plaintiff named. The court granted that, and when that happened, we got all kinds of communications from the public at large saying, we know this person. And it turned out that person had a lot of skeletons in
Yep.
his closet. And frankly, we would not have had access to that but for that information being
Right.
out there. So I think Jay-Z's slightly different situation because he's got a lot of resources and great lawyers at his disposal. But I think in terms of fairness, the presumption should be that a plaintiff should be named.